Hi everyone, welcome to my review of M. Night Shyamalan's Lady in the Water in 2006. Here it is on Blu-ray, and of course we are here back again, very very quickly here, with another Shyamalan review. Of course, I've been doing, night reviews, of course, his work, and in order, I'm going to be going back to Wide Awake, of course, at some point, but The Sixth Sense, all the way through, to Split. And of course, in January, I'll be going to see Glass, literally, within a few days of it coming out. And, of course, cannot wait to see that. I'll be doing a review of that. And once I've reviewed all these films, including Glass, then I'll do a ranking. It seems, that's the whole point, really. I've been, rewatching these. I do usually do an annual kind of rewatch of some of these anyway. But, I've been doing all of these films. I'm going to be doing them all in order to, prepare myself for Glass. Thought it was the best time to do it. Then I'll be doing a ranking of least favourite to favourite. And this film, I got this on Blu-ray a few days ago. It's the one that really, certainly, it's the one that kind of made him very, very hated on. It's the one where critically he was panned completely across the board. It didn't do as well at the box office either. And just fans in general, just really most had had enough. And it was called a complete failure, a disaster. Roger Ebert would give it a low score. And yes, just this is considered by some to be one of the worst films of all time. Like After Earth is, certainly The Last Airbender, The Happening, and at times The Village, unfortunately. I think the previous four films I've reviewed are some of the best films of all time, some of the very best, and The Village included. Masterpieces. Shyamalan is one of the directors that have been, and writers, of course, that have inspired me the most and moved me the most with these films. And I just think when he was on form here, prior to this, of course, I'd not seen this, but already I thought he was one of the best directors of all time. And I'd seen Split, and that was great. That was amazing. And I can't wait to review that. But this film, I didn't have the highest of hopes going into this, and I think going by what he said, Knight has actually said, that he actually has quite an affection for this film, and he considers it, one of his favourites that he made, which is interesting. But yes, it's really not a popular film, and I wasn't expecting much. But again, I kind of would have thought I may like it, or at least in some ways, because The Village is also panned across the board, really. And I absolutely loved it. I didn't think it would be as good. I thought there probably would be a step down, and I will say, I think I have massive respect for Shyamalan and all this kind of stuff. I will say one thing: it's not as bad as it's made out to be. For me, I didn't think it was, a bad film actually at all. I think there was quite a few flaws, and overall, I think it's really, really experimental. And I can understand, what he was going for a lot of the time, and I think because of its nature of how he's experimenting, and just at the same time, I just don't quite feel his passion coming through as much, all this kind of stuff. It is disappointing, if you're going by from what I thought, the previous four were like, they're all stunning masterpieces. This one is a step down, but it's damn sight better than what, it's made out to be by many. I think actually, it's an okay film. I liked the film, and, I liked another Shyamalan that is hated on. I think this guy just, really is a genius, and I think even this one, which is very, very flawed, I think it is actually pretty decent for quite a lot of the film. Overall, it comes down to being an average film, because it has got a lot of flaws and things that just didn't go, in the ways that I thought they would have, and just didn't quite work. The tone at times was a bit off, and I just think some of the characters and all this kind of stuff. But basically, I watched it tonight for the first time, and backstory would be around about the time it came out, I knew of Shyamalan. I'd seen Signs, The Village, and The Sixth Sense. So I absolutely, I loved Shyamalan at this point. Had not seen Unbreakable. I only just saw that for the first time last year. And yes, this one just didn't. I didn't, for some reason, I just didn't want to go and see it. Even though I'd seen these previous three ones that I talked about, and I loved them. I'd seen them multiple times. This one just didn't. I thought I'll watch it at some point, and it just didn't quite grab me enough to go to see it at the cinema. I just didn't think, it would. I don't know. I just didn't think I would like it too much. And then here we are, over a decade later, and I finally just got round to seeing it tonight. And yes, as I say, it's a like from me. I think this film is very, very strange, and it's a really unique kind of idea, and it's kind of apparently it's kind of comes from bedtime stories he would tell his children, which is very, very nice. And making that into a film, it's really good. I think that's a thing to praise, and overall, I think the ideas, the fact that he just went ahead with this. It's very, very different and very, very risky film to make. Certainly, I think praise for that. The fact that he just went ahead and it's a very, very bold film, and it's not a great film for me, and I would say it's just average overall, but it does have some kind of magic about it and uniqueness once again, and I think Shyamalan brought this to all his films previous to this, but I think this one actually it seems like he's kind of veering off. I don't know, but it's not quite him, and I think at times, and other times it is, and it just doesn't quite come through fully as it should have done. But I think what his philosophy is, when it's not him coming through in the film, it's not, it's not as good. It's not the ones. I think it's very, very mixed feelings on this. I think it's very hard to see exactly how this kind of how there was a massive dip really for me between The Village and this. I just think although there's fragments that are actually quite wonderful, including the score and just some certain moments that are really quite pure and human. I think overall it's got a lot of stuff that I think he felt like he had to include, like humour, and it just really set the film off at times in terms of the tone, and just it was a bit annoying. Some of the characters, some of the performances. Of course, it's basically about this this water nymph who lands in this swimming pool, and Bryce Dallas Howard, of course, wonderful actress when on form. She plays, her name is Story, so it's very weird as well. It is a weird film. It's a very strange and different film, but it is unique, and I think it's nice to see this film. But I think she's a water nymph, and basically Paul Giamatti, he plays Cleveland. He's basically the superintendent of this apartment complex, and the swimming pool, as I've said, in the centre, the bottom, and basically, yeah, she appears very early on in the swimming pool, and then you find out basically that she's getting prevented by these creatures, and its presence to kind of from going back to her world, her water world, and stuff, and yes, basically, it's from there I can't really describe it, but it's very, very exploration of many different things, including communication and all this kind of stuff. Paul Giamatti plays Cleveland, and I think he is good in the film actually. At times very good, as is Bryce Dallas Howard. Very, very hard character to play, a very hard role. I think overall she is definitely good. I can praise that, and I think the direction. Once you get over the first 20 minutes, but a bit rocky really for me. I think the direction. Shyamalan brings something unique and quite nice to the table. I think it's a very human film at times. I think really commendable. I think very, very the best of intentions here. I feel it's not. I don't feel it is pretentious. Many have called it pretentious and self-indulgent. I don't feel that at all. I think certainly, despite its flaws, it definitely means well. I think Shyamalan was really going for something. He was trying to be very human, and it was, a lot of the time. But it's kind of a weirdness. The way that the fantasy plays into the film, it doesn't always work perfectly. That's for sure. It is in this apartment complex, and I will praise the fact that it's kind of it's one location. It kind of has that kind of the charm to it, and kind of progression. You get to kind of know this complex and the residents. But again, it feels at times a bit limited to what he could have done if he had gone full on, kind of with the fantasy genre. I think actually maybe if Paul Giamatti had been, his character had been taken into Bryce Dallas Howard's world in some way, if she, early on, if that had happened, you've got this guy, kind of not the best of jobs and stuff, and he's kind of in this kind of this apartment and everything. He struggles to kind of communicate with people at times, and he'd been brought into her world and tried to help her, but as well, just the whole fantasy stuff could have, I think, potential to be, a lot better than the kind of in this location. That would have been more interesting. But what is there, in the fantasy stuff, the elements, I think the creature designs quite good, actually, really good. It's quite creative, and just I think the effects are quite good as well. I think there is some odd stuff in the cinematography, and I think certainly early on, it's got some weird, odd choices, different choices to kind of place the camera, and kind of stuff where it just a bit, obstructive. People kind of standing in front of others in particular ways that I can see. Maybe it was going for something different here, but just didn't quite work for me at times. And some zooms that didn't quite work, and just some general framing issues that for me just didn't quite work. The editing was at first just a bit off, but actually once the film, after the 20-minute mark, I liked the film. I did. I think actually had some good moments, definitely, and overall, I think it's some very good moments at times, and overall it's a solid film. It's an average film, I think. I think that the score is actually really amazing again, by James Newton Howard. Not as good as his previous ones, Shyamalan, but it's a really, really nice score. I think it's some magical kind of sense of wonder, and just kind of overall just a very beautiful, overwhelming score. And yes, very, very well used in the film. I think Paul Giamatti as well. I think his performance is very good at times. Overall, a good performance. There's a couple of moments that are off. One of the things that really though brings the film down is the humour, and the overall, some of the side characters. Yes, there's some really, really odd moments at the beginning, especially. You've got this kind of guy who does weightlifting in the film, and he just does some weird stuff, including actually talking to the camera, and that is a cross box. That doesn't work for me on this occasion. Rarely does that actually work in a film. Kind of talking to the camera in this manner, but it can work. It didn't here. It's very, very out of place. And yes, just overall, some of the side characters were quite annoying. Others were a bit bland. Some of them were actually I liked, including one played by Jeffrey Wright. He's a great actor, and I think I did like him, and I liked his family as well. And overall, I think even though some of the side characters are a bit bland and a bit kind of annoying at times, there is an overall warmth that sets in to this. I really liked just the feel of this whole kind of complex, and the way that kind of progresses, the warmth of it all, kind of the humanity of it all, just the way they're all kind of, as well, when they kind of join up to kind of basically save, kind of help the character's story out. I think it's actually very warm and human, and I did enjoy it, to an extent as well. And I think it does have some issues, in the second half. At times, it doesn't quite have the peak. There's after the 20-minute mark to the hour mark, you could say, is at its best. The film, consistently. I think M. Night Shyamalan as well. He's a character in the film. He's a writer, and he plays a big role in the film. Again, he's been criticised for this. I don't see how it's a valid criticism to say something. Why is a director acting his own film? I mean, madness to say that is a flaw. It is not a flaw whatsoever. Just look at Chaplin, even just people like Tarantino and stuff. You can't say it's a flaw for them to kind of appear in their own film. I mean, it's just madness. For me personally, it is madness. If he wanted to be in his film, that he wrote and directed, then let him be in the film. That's brilliant that he wants to do that, and he was actually very good in the film, I think. But again, his character kind of doesn't follow through, as I was saying. Kind of in the kind of second half of the film, some threads don't quite follow through, and it kind of loses a bit of the the kind of connection there. But it does have a kind of overall warmth and kind of still an engagement to the second half of the film. And I think the finale actually is really good at times. I think really set in the emotion there. I think overall it's got some fairly emotional moments. I think it's very, very pure at times, but it does have a lot of flaws, this film. I think in the cinematography, the editing, the overall, the execution of some ideas just don't quite work as well as they should. They don't reach what I think Shyamalan really could have done if he had just gone full ahead. You know, it seems at times like he kind of just lacks a little bit of confidence of his ideas here. And yes, I just think some of the things could have been better if they'd gone, you know, full on, you know, into the fantasy genre. And just overall, the script does have obviously issues. The characters, you know, they're nothing. I don't think they're anything special. You know, hence the kind of average rating that I'll give it. You know, there's some flaws with the film, quite a few. There are some things that just don't quite go there, and there is some bland aspects. But overall, you know, I don't think this is to call it one of the worst films. You know, I don't think that at all. You know, if you don't like the film, that's fine. You know, it's understandable. It's not a great film, I don't feel. But you know, I really think, very impressive in some areas. I commend, you know, Shyamalan for going ahead with this. You know, and you know, I think his role in the film was good. I think Bryce Howard, Paul Giamatti, they gave, you know, good performances overall. I think there's a couple of off-tone moments. The humour throughout, you know, I think. Certainly in the first 20 minutes and other times throughout the film, it does take away, you know, it's tonal breaks, definite tonal breaks there, and it just comes across, you know, it's not earned, you know, and some of the side characters as well, of course, not good in the film really at times, but, you know, I think overall, it's a human story, it's a very unique one. I think I did enjoy it. I think, you know, it's got some good performances in there, the direction, at times is actually impressive, definitely, and you know, I think the use of music is very, very good, quite wonderful at times. You know, I think there is some shots, don't get me wrong, throughout the film that are just a bit off for me. Certainly not that good, but other times, you know, they are impressive. This is a mixed film at times, but I think it is overall a film that I liked and I did enjoy. I would definitely watch it again. You know, it's not for me, you know. Basically, it's a massive step down from, you know, his masterpieces. This guy, you know, genius masterpieces. You know, his previous four. This film, big step down. But again, you know, I think he has to be praised. You know, I think with this film, it's not by no means a bad film. It's a unique film. It's a film that really means well. It's nice what he's doing here. It's very, very human at times. You know, it's got some really interesting ideas with the creatures and the overall. You know, just the way I like the prologue as well, actually. But you know, just because of these kind of comedy tonal breaks, you know, that happen certainly very early on and definitely throughout the rest of the film. You know, it has some tonal issues overall. It struggles to kind of at times be a very, very consistent tone. You know, and just not just the comedy, but at times because of the fantasy doesn't perfectly mesh with the kind of this, you know, this basically block of flats. You could say of a swimming pool. It just doesn't quite perfectly come together in that sense, but you know, the elements that are there are impressive. The creature designs, all this kind of stuff, and yeah, it's just I think it's an average film, but it is definitely a unique one, and you know, it's very, very different, and you know, it's just once again it's impressive ideas from Shyamalan, you know, to come up with this, and yes, it's quite original at times. It just doesn't, in execution, in the way it translates to the screen, I think. You know, it definitely has quite a few flaws, and overall it just doesn't reach the level that this guy could easily have done. But I do think it's worth a praise, worth a check out, definitely. And yeah, I think overall definitely a like from me. So overall, I think I'll have to give Lady in the Water a 63%. I think, you know, it really did. I did connect with quite a few moments in this film, and you know, there's stretches of say half an hour or so at a time, where actually it was good. And I think it was very human. You know, it really it was something different, something unique, and you know, it had the best of intentions. You know, I don't think it all worked for me. You know, but definitely the overall narrative of this is one that is it's warm. It means well. You know, it goes for something. He's only concerned with humanity really with this, and kind of. You know, it is of course kind of a kid's fantasy, and it doesn't always work, but it is something that has a nice feel to it. You know, it has a warmth to it, and you know, I think it's you know, it's definitely worth praise. I think yeah, it's a shame that it got really panned. You know, I think yeah, it's average for me. It's not anything special overall, but it's definitely not a bad film for me. And you know, once again, just a shame that kind of it worked out this way from Of course, After Earth for me is definitely worse than this, and of course, The Happening is a worse film. We'll kind of get to that, of course. Probably watch it tomorrow or the day after. I'm going to get it on Blu-ray, and it's coming soon. But yes, I think The Happening, although it may be not a good film, it is actually an enjoyable film. Maybe in unintentional ways, but I could end up saying I enjoy it because it's just so entertaining. Because yes, of how sometimes bad it is and how it comes across and everything, and the way the acting and all this kind of stuff. But it's for that it's not an unwatchable film, and it's not maybe not one of the very worst films of all time. But yes, Lady in the Water, I think, is the one where he really, really he did not do well in terms of critical kind of in the critical light, and of course commercially it was definitely worse than his previous films. And I can see very, very unique things in this film. I think it's human. I think overall it's a nice film. I liked the main players in the film. I did like some of the supporting cast at times, but others not so much. It kind of off-putting and annoying, and turning a bit bland. And they didn't really question. And I don't always say there's rules with kind of fantasy or sci-fi, but when it's just an apartment block and it's just normal people, and they don't really question the kind of this whole kind of this woman coming in, this fantastical woman, and all this kind of stuff with the creatures. They never once really questioned it, and in that sense, it became a bit less believable and kind of it just felt a bit weird there how it didn't get questioned. But for its flaws, I think definitely a like from me. I did enjoy it, and I feel it had some very good moments. Overall, it was too flawed to be called more than average, really. Or maybe it could have been called good, but overall, didn't quite be. It wasn't quite that. I think the final act actually was very good at times, and I really liked just the way it ended. It was very powerful, and just it has a beauty to it. This film, I think a thumbs up. For this Shyamalan film. I think Knight done a very good job. His acting in the film, it is well written at times. Other times, I think maybe not the script isn't the worst thing. I think it's a solid script. It's just the way the things happen with the comedy and just the way that it's executed on screen. It kind of lessens what this film potentially could have been. And I do have my flaws. I think I've said enough, but I don't think it's a bad film. I really don't. I think it's another like from me, and at least I can say that. I think I gave it a go and I liked it. It's definitely better than I thought it would be. But yes, I think Shyamalan really does not deserve the kind of the flack he's got. Yes, some of these next ones are worse than this, and they're not good films, in my opinion. But again, he's made so much great stuff that kind of have to kind of maybe not pass over them individually, but in terms of his career, he still went on form one of the best directors for me of all time. So the fact that I still like this, and there's only a couple more that aren't so good, he's still an absolutely brilliant director. So yes, thanks for watching my review of Lady in the Water, and next up, of course, is The Happening. Lady in the Water was a massive dip in terms compared to this masterpiece, but I think it's a solid film. It's okay. I think I liked it, and yes, thanks for watching my review.